Hey everyone, welcome back. In this tutorial, I'll be going over how to build a full stack weather app using Flask as our backend and React as our front end. As you can see, this is our server over here for our Flask, and if we input a city name, for example, let's do Houston, what's going to happen is it's going to send a post request in our backend, and our backend will actually fetch the API for us and return us the data over here. And all the code in the video can be found in the description below in my GitHub. We want to first get our API key, so go to the first link in the description below and sign up if you already haven't, and go on over to your name up here, click on my API keys, and copy and paste this key somewhere safe. Also make sure that the status is active or else your project's not going to work. I've opened up a blank folder inside of my VS Code window, and what we're going to do is we're going to add a new file to our Explorer. So we're going to come up here, click the folder icon, and we're going to call this backend. And inside of our backend, let's make a file called main.py. Now this main.py file is going to have all of our backend server and everything in there. And let's also go to your terminal, and in your terminal type npm create v at latest. What we're going to be doing here is creating our front end server. So we're going to call the project name just front end. We're going to choose React and JavaScript, and we're going to copy and paste these two commands inside of our terminal. Now it should take a while to download, and once it does, I'll come back. Okay, once it's downloaded all of our files, we can close out of the terminal for now, go into our front end, go to our source, and open the app.jsx. And we're going to copy and delete all of this. And once we do this, we can type in rfce to just generate a simple function and export it. If the rfc command doesn't work, go to your extensions, search up React, and it should be the first one, and download this. Now we can begin to code our backend. To start coding our backend, we want to first install Flask from Python. So to do this, let's cd into our backend directory and do pip install Flask. And for me, I've already got it installed, but for you it might take some time. So once you've installed it, close your terminal, and in our main.py we can start programming. So we can first import Flask from Flask. So we'll do from Flask import Flask. We're also going to need JSONify so that we can convert our data into JSON and send it back. And we're also going to need request so we can actually fetch our API. And under here, we're also going to need cores. So from Flask underscore cores, import cores. Now what cores does is cores just lets us send and receive data from different APIs. And we're also going to need requests so that we can fetch data from our API. And this request from Flask, this request just lets us get data from our front end, and this request lets us get data from our API, which is going to be from the weather. Under all of the imports, go ahead and set up our Flask server. So we can do app is equal to Flask underscore underscore name underscore underscore. Under here, let's also set up our cores for our app. And under here, under the cores, let's set up our API. So we can do API key is equal to, and then copy and paste your API key you got from the website here. And under here, we can do if underscore underscore name underscore underscore is equal to underscore underscore main underscore underscore. We can do app.run and debug is equal to true. Now if we save this and if we open up a terminal, we can cd into our backend and we can do python main.py. And this will run our backend server, so we can actually open this inside of our Chrome or any browser window. Once you've opened it up, it should say not found, and this is because we actually don't have any routes. So under our API key and above our if statement, we can actually set up our route. So we can do at app.route and in here we can set up our URL. So let's just call it /API. Let's also set up our methods. So our methods will be post and get. And under here, let's make a function called API. And let's have this just return JSONify hello from Flask. If we save this, and inside of our browser, if we go to our URL and we do /API, as you can see, it's going to say hello from Flask. Now this is indicating that our API is working and our backend is working. Now we can actually start setting up our front end and fetching data from the backend. Once in our front end, let's actually run it by going to our terminal and cding into front end and doing npm run dev. Now once you've got this running, go to this URL, and this is our front end. Now let's actually import use state, and under our app function, let's make 3 states. We're gonna make the first state be the city, so we're gonna do const city and set city. Now this is just gonna be for when the user is typing up the city, so that we can just store it in our state so we can send it to our backend in a good manner. And the other state is going to be the data that we're actually gonna get from our backend. So we're gonna just call this data and set data, and this data will be in like a list, so we're gonna do it like that, bracket. And let's also make a state for loading, so that when the user clicks search and when their data is loading, we can just have it say there, so the initial value will be false. And inside of our return, let's make a div, and let's have this have an input, and we can do the value of the input to be city, and we can do on change. We're going to make an arrow function with the event, and we're going to do set city e.target.value. Now once we've got this, let's make a button. Let's have this be search. Now we're gonna make it so that when we click the button, something's gonna happen, but let's actually just set up our HTML first. Now under our button, let's have a ternary operator so we can check loading. So if the loading is true, we're going to set a p tag saying loading. Else, if it's not true, then we're not going to show anything for our loading. And under here, let's make a hr tag, and the hr just adds like a fine line but to separate our inputs from the actual data that we get. And under here, let's make an empty div, and once we get the data, we're going to store and show all of our data inside of this div. Now if we save it, as you can see in our front end, it's going to have the input and the search and the HR, and under here will be where we're going to store all of our data. Now let's make a function that when we click the search button, it's going to fetch the data into our backend, and our backend will actually fetch the API for us. So let's make a function here. Let's do const fetch data is equal to an asynchronous function. It's going to be an arrow function. And in here, let's just not do anything actually. Let's just save this, and hold on a minute. Let me see what I did here, guys. Okay, I see the problem. I just accidentally put this little dash here, so once we remove this, our app should be working perfectly fine. And inside of our button, let's do a on click. So once we click this, we're going to make a function which will call our fetch data. Now that we've got the search button working, let's start fetching the data inside of our function. So under here, we're going to set the loading to be true, so that once we click this button, then we're gonna initialize all the fetching APIs, and that could take some time. So we're gonna set loading to be true so it shows up down here. And under here, let's make a try function, and inside of our try, let's do const response. Hold on. Const response is going to be await fetch, and we want to fetch our URL over here. So we can just copy and paste our URL, and we can have it fetch it right there. Now after the quotation mark, we can add curly brackets, and in here let's do the method to be post. The headers, so the headers inside of here are going to be content dash type application dash JSON, and below the header we can add a body tag, which is actually going to deliver, or like the body tag is going to have everything that we want to send to our backend. So we want to just send the JSON.stringify, and we want to set it as an object city. So we're going to be sending it to our backend just the city that the user typed in, and we have to use JSON.stringify because we can't just send regular text. We have to send it in a JSON format, which is what this does right here. Now once we get our data back, we can actually go under here. We can do if response dot OK. So if our response is good, we're going to do const data is equal to await response.json. So once we get the data back from our backend, we're going to set it in this data right here. And let's actually console.log the data, and let's also set the data to be this data right here. Else, if the response is not okay, then let's just do a console.error failed to fetch, so that we can see if anything went wrong. And here in our try, we want to also have a catch. So if we do catch any error, then we can just console.log the error that we caught. And finally, once all of our function is like complete, we can set the loading to be false. So let me actually go over everything that we're doing in here. So what we're doing is, inside of this fetch data function, we're making a post request to our backend, which is this right here, and we are sending it as our body to be the city that that the user typed in over here. And we're basically checking if the response is okay, and if our backend is working all good, then we want to have the data of our response.json, and we want to set the data to be the data up here. Now eventually, once we actually program all of our weather API fetching, then this data will just be the data that we get from the API. And down here in our catch error, we're just getting any errors that might arise and logging it. And finally, once all of this is complete, we're just setting the loading to be false, so that the user knows that the data is ready. Also, I forgot to mention, I made a mistake over here. Inside of our button tag, after the fetch data, you want to add parentheses, or else the function will not run. Now let's actually start programming our backend, so that once we get the data as our city name, we can use that and call the weather API function and return the data back into our front end. Once we're in our backend, let's make a check so that every time we get a fetch request from a front end, or really any API, we're going to check if the method that we sent the request with was a post request. Because if you remember, in our app.jsx, we sent the method as a post request. So under our API and above the return, let's make a if statement. So let's do if request.method is equal to post. So if the method was a post request, we're going to get the city that we got from the request. So we're going to do city is equal to request.get_JSON, and this just gets the data from the fetch that we sent. Now under here, we're going to do if city. So if we have city, or like some data, and if we have the key inside of the city array being called city inside of city, then what we're going to do is we're going to send a request to our weather API. So we're going to do response is equal to requests.get, and we're going to make this an f string, and we're going to paste here this endpoint, and you can actually find this in the description. And basically what we're doing here is this is just the endpoint that we get the weather from the weather API. And as you can see, we're setting the query of the city to be the city that we got from our fetch request. And we're setting the API key to be the API key variable, which we can have up here, right here. And also here where it says units, if you want to use metric, you can just change that to metric, but I'm going to be using imperial. And also after the parentheses, you want to add a .json so that we get the data back in a JSON format, which we can easily transfer over to our front end. And under our response, we're going to check if response. So if we even got a response, we're going to return to our front end the JSONify of that response. Else, if we don't have a response, we're going to return a if we don't have a response, we're going to return a JSONify that says invalid data received. Mind my spelling if I got it wrong. And we're gonna send a 400 error. Now if we save this, and in our front end, as you can see, we are console.logging the data that we get from the backend, right? So if we open up our console here, save it, and if we enter a text for like a city, let's do Sydney, Australia. As you can see, we're going to get our data here. And if you also noticed, when we clicked the search button, it's going to say loading over here. Now that we got the data from our backend, so from here we can actually start to show this on our HTML under the HR tag, so the user can see what the data looks like. Displaying the weather data is actually quite simple. This entire object over here, if you remember, we actually already have saved it inside of this data state right here when we got it from the backend, so right over here. So all we have to do is just check the data and make sure that the code that we got from the data, so this code right here, is not a 404 error code. And then if it's not, then we can display all of this other data using just the names. Now to do this, let's actually first delete this div that we made, and in its place let's add a ternary operator which checks if we have the data, question mark, and if we do have the data, we want to check if the code of that data is not equal to 404. And we also want to check if data even exists, so we'll do data, question mark. And after this, let's add parentheses, colon, and null. And inside of these parentheses, we're going to put all of the data in here that that we have. So inside the parentheses, let's add a h3, and I'm going to put the name of the city. So to do that, just add parentheses or like curly brackets here, and inside of it do data.name. The reason we do name is because right here it says the name is Sydney. And now if we save this, as you can see, it's going to say Sydney right over here. And under this h3, let's also add the temperature. So I'm going to add another h3. Oh yeah, I forgot. We want to wrap all of this inside of a div. So let's make a div up here. Div. And let's copy and paste these two here and put it inside of this one div parent element. Great, now we're not going to have any errors. Now in this div, this h3, let's add the temperature. So we'll do temperature is going to be, the temperature is going to be data.main.temp. Now if we save this, as you can see, it'll say the temperature is 62.19, and if we check inside of our object right here, inside of this entire data, inside the main, we're going to have the temp, which is 62.19, which is right here. Now to take this one step further, we could add the degree symbol up here. To do that, it's quite simple. All we have to do is type the and deg, and then this, as you can see, it's going to have the degree symbol right here. And depending on which one you used over here, so for the units I used imperial, so I'm going to put Fahrenheit, so just put F. But if you use Celsius, you could put C. And under here we can also just put the regular weather, so we can just put weather is going to be data.weather 0.main. If we save this, as you can see, the weather right now in Sydney is clear. And if we check our object over here, inside of the data in weather, inside of the array 0, as you can see, the main is clear. So obviously you could make this look a lot more cleaner, a lot more neater, but since this is mainly like an API fetching tutorial, we're not going to be getting into that here. Now, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please leave a like and subscribe.